today's Scaling with People podcast. I'm Gwyneth Curry, founder and CEO of Guide to HR, and your host. I'm excited to have Talila on the call today, and she's going to give us a little insight into her background, and we're going to jump into why it's so important that you understand your engineering product cycle, where to have some warning signals on when you may want to change some things up, and also just some quick, simple steps, maybe not so simple, on leading organizational transformation, especially within the engineering group. So that's a lot to go with, but Talila, welcome aboard. Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Thank you, Gwyneth. It's such a pleasure being here. So I have more than 25 years of experience in leading product and engineering team. I was a CTO in both private companies and Fortune 500 companies like Stanley, Black & Decker, and Harris, Motorola. And in the last 2 years, I'm serving as fractional CTO and as advisor to CEOs and C-suite leaders, mostly scale-ups and mid-market companies that are looking to grow profit and scale.
Love that. And that's so important. I mean, no matter what kind of business you have some kind of product, some kind of engineering, some kind of technical platform, right, that you're needing to build up. Maybe you're selling it. Maybe you're using that to sell something else. So how can a founder CEO work with their engineering and product team to keep things simple, have an effective process to ensure quality, which we know is key to winning the game, and also consistency, another key to winning the game?
So, it's nice that you're asking about process, because this is a lot of the time, this is a sticking point for startups and scale-ups, because many early stage companies reject process. They think this is like the enemy of nimble development. They view it as bureaucratic, as something that would stop them. And this is so not the case. If you have a small team of developers, like a handful of developers, communication just flows freely. You use Slack, or you sit all together in the same room. You just talk to each other all the time. So everybody understands what's going on. But as the company starts growing, this doesn't work anymore.
No.
A little bit formal. You need to document the requirements. Everybody needs to understand what's going on. Everybody needs to understand what's expected, what the customer wants, and not everybody speaks to the customer. Everybody have their hands into the same code, and sometimes they can write over each other. Maybe they don't coordinate the testing properly. So that leads to quality failures. They lead to delays, to misunderstandings, getting things out to the field that is not really what the customer wants. And ultimately, it can hurt revenue. It can hurt growth. So the solution is really agile processes, not something rigid, not something bureaucratic, something very lean, very basic, just to make sure that that everybody is coordinated, that things flow, that there are clear guidelines to ensure everybody understands the requirements, avoid code conflicts, and build software aligned with market needs.
It makes me think, it correlates a lot with the HR front in regards to people, right? You're basically defining the language we're speaking, the expectations, how we're going to march, when we're going to march, but you're not saying like it needs to be XYZ. It's basically giving them that guardrail to understand where they're working in so that everyone's working in the same space, that same sandbox, without having, like you said, confusion and writing over each other's code. And I also get a lot of that on the HR front too. Like, oh, well, we need some HR, but please don't come in and give us a bunch of red tape. Like, I get it, right? Like companies, small companies, startups, even the middle size, the scaling companies, they need to be agile. But having that foundation in place, that structure in place to say, new hire, here is how we work. here is how we communicate, here is what we're focusing on and the direction in which we're going, will actually help people get up to speed faster, work together better, and actually be more productive, which then at the end of the day is what you want, because that's going to get you to the next stage of your life cycle.
Exactly. I mean, you can think about it. It's like when you have a small town and you have roads and you have cars. If you only have like one or two cars in town, you really don't need all the traffic lights, right? But
Right.
as the number of cars grow, if you don't have traffic lights, if you don't have signs, you just have collision and it won't end well. So this is kind of the same thing.
I love that analogy because it's like I just moved to a small town, but I tell everyone, no, we have traffic lights. We're not that small. So like I love that analogy because I think about it when companies start or when cities start to grow, they're like, oh yeah, we got our first traffic light. And I feel like that's such a great analogy for business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I know you kind of focus more on the scaling companies and maybe not necessarily the initial startup, but when you're working with your clients, how do you define a central streamlining in regards to your hiring, onboarding, and training process to help each department have its like unique modules and unique way of working?
So actually, I want to correct you a little bit. I do
Okay.
with early stage startup as well.
Oh, okay, great.
It's a bit of a different role. So with scale ups, they usually already have a CTO or a lead technology, either an engineering VP or a lead technologist, and then they usually bring me in when there is a problem, and it's like, how do I make my team more productive? How do I improve my quality? How do I be more predictable with my releases or bring things to market faster? With startups, like pre-seed, I actually work now with a pre-seed startup. This is a completely different mode, right? This is like a clean slate. I have a CEO that's not technical at all. And he needed somebody, first of all, to help him pick up the right outsourcing team and to work with them, because his expertise, he's a brilliant guy, but his expertise is he's the subject matter expert on what we're trying to develop. He's not an expert in developing software. So for instance, we talked about the data for this startup is very sensitive. So we talked about making sure that there's the right cybersecurity guardrails so that the data is secure, how to do that. And this is something that when he talked with outsourcer before, this was not top of mind. But
and data security really needs to be top of mind of everybody in today's life, right?
Exactly. But especially for this startup that deals with very sensitive data, this is like an absolute must. So we talked about that and we added that to the requirements for the outsourcer. Or he would need some certification. This is, again, something that he didn't think about. So these are all technical things, or how the testing will be done, or the fact that we want to work in an agile format so he can have demos all the time and see that we are going in the right direction and not, let the team work for 6 months and then come up with the wrong thing. So just talking him through these things and guiding the development in the right way, that's what I do as a fraction CTO. Basically doing the same thing that a full-time CTO do, but just in a smaller size.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so talking about like smaller size startups, you build something and then eventually you're getting to the point where you're growing your business, you're flourishing. Is there a point in time where in the life cycle, a CEO, especially an example like that, where they're not technical, they should be evaluating their product, what engineering has been coding and developing, and is there a certain time in their life cycle they should be doing that? And like, how should they be doing that? What should they be looking at to say, ooh, this is a red flag, this is a trigger, we need to reevaluate? Because I have gone into a few businesses where they really do need to restart building from scratch, but they're so far along in the cycle of their product that it would literally have to be like starting a whole new company. Like, it's not possible. There's not enough money and time to do that. There's got to be some triggers that would have warned the CEO and the founders and, even some other leaders that you were going to end up there. What do you think are some of those triggers that a founder should be looking at?
There are kind of standard, I would say even basic key indicators that let you see how well your development is going. I would say the number of problems reports coming from customers. Is the team delivering on time? Is what they deliver in line with the customer expectations? How well the user experience is doing? What is the customer feedback? So you just measure things that are the things that how are things going normally? Do they go the way they should go? Mm-hmm. And I would think that the biggest indicator for things going wrong is if there are too many problems coming from the field. Yeah. And once you see that these measurements are not the way they should be, then you should start thinking how to correct them. You shouldn't wait until this is a huge problem, because then it becomes a huge problem. And the longer you wait, the harder it is to solve it.
Yeah. And the more costly, and to the point where, could be the end of your business because there's not a way to really resolve it without massive investment, which is what I've seen. I've seen some companies do that, and it's like, what are some triggers? I just wanted to kind of make that offering to those listening, because I don't want anyone to fail in their business because they didn't watch for those triggers, watch for those warnings, and end up with a product that ultimately would have to be re-envisioned. So those are some great KPIs to look for sure.
Yes.
So I know that you just wrote a book, and it's all about the triumph of framework. And I know we talked a little bit about framework and processes and so forth. In your book, you talk about 7 steps to leading organizational transformation, kind of what we were just talking about there, like when should you start looking if I need to transform, right? So yes. Tell us a little bit about what are these steps and what people can get out of your book.
So the Triumph framework is a step to transform organizational transformation. And initially, I thought it would apply to big corporations, the type of corporations, with $1 billion in revenue and thousands of employees. But when I started working with scale-ups, I realized that they may need this too, because a lot of the time, they run into the things when a company starts growing, they sometimes need to change the way they operate. And because the things that got them there won't get them to the next stage. And it's hard. Change is hard. Whether it's a small organization or a big organization, change is hard. And what the Triumph framework does, it gives you a framework for for change, how to drive the change effectively. So actually in the example that you talked about, figuring out that something is wrong. How do you figure out, okay, so something doesn't work well. How do you figure out what's the root cause? That's the first step. You need to figure out why things are not working. Why do you have quality problems? Is it because your process is off? Or is it because your code base is off and you need to rewrite things? So the first step is to figure out what's wrong. Then you have to make sure that everybody is aligned and wants to work on fixing it. The next step is communicating, figuring out the plan, and so forth. So there are 7 steps. And the most important thing, that's the thread throughout the book, is that you want to get all your team involved, both in the ideating the plan and implementing the solution, because the more people are involved, they feel like they own the plan, they view it as their own solution, they're invested in it, and they just drive it with you. And that's super important. So in the example that you talked about, right, like things are crumbling, you want the engineering team to be part of the solution. You want them to sit with you and figure out how to do things better. And usually when you do that, you can come to a much better solution. So I was called to a startup where they, the initial thought was everything is crumbling, we have bad code, we have to write everything from scratch. And this is something that you don't want to do, because that means halting all activity and investing time in activity that doesn't give you any new revenue. That's not good for business, especially if you're a small company that has limited funding and needs to get as many customers as possible before the funding runs out, right? So the way that I approached it was I had a strategic review, a strategic architecture review with all the engineering team. We just went and we dissected the entire code. We dissected it into modules, and we found what modules actually had most of the problems and what needed really to be refactored, and what we could leave as is, at least temporarily. Mm-hmm. So we found a way to carve out a small team, just a few people that worked on the biggest issues, whereas the rest of the team could continue develop revenue generating features and support the customer. And I think that's, and we wouldn't have been able to do that unless there was a real buyout from the entire engineering team.
Yeah, absolutely. So two things I heard, especially because, I have the mindset of the people operations, right? The employees and the culture. So one I heard is what I constantly am driving home with my CEOs and founders is bring your people along the journey. Even managers, sometimes you're so stuck in your head, the information, you're making decisions, you're processing it, and then all of a sudden you're on the other side, and the people are like, "How did we wait? What? How are we going there? Like we're over here, like we're on the left side. How do we get to the right? Like there's no bridge. Like how did you get there? Right? Oh, well, because you're going to build the bridge, and we're going to have this much time to do it, and like that's all in the person's head. Well, you're going to have a hard time getting everyone to be on the same page. So that's one thing I heard is like, bring the people along and let them be part of the journey. There are so many times when you give someone the capability to provide feedback and even have a moment to just like soak it in and think it through, and then have questions about, okay, but did you think like what XYZ, which maybe are things that you didn't think about because maybe they're not your skill set, they're not your wheelhouse, right? So being able to actually identify things that could be, ooh, that was a hole we might have fallen into, but because I brought I brought you along, Talila, we talked about the product side and we made some changes, and now we're not going to fall into that trap, right? And also just being outside of your mind, you get more creativity. The more people that are involved, although obviously you don't want like a 200 person like meeting to try to come out, right? But like getting the feedback and getting perspective and seeing different points of views, this is how you have a really solid process in place or foundation or net outcome or whatever it is you're working on, because you're actually thinking through things from different perspectives, different experiences. So that was one thing I heard. The second one was people align. I love working with this one CEO. He basically went out to the all hands and put a picture of arrows going in every which direction that you could. And he goes, we can't do this. If we want to be successful, we all need to be aligned. We can be in different places, but we're all shooting to the same target to actually get to this company to be where it needs to be. And that moment of like reality of people recognizing, oh yeah, we're probably not aligned. And, oh, this is where we're going. Let's talk about that more in detail. Let's answer like the questions of why are we going there? How are we going there? Why do I need to change my arrow? Like, let's get that all out, because then we can really focus on what needs to be done and work together to get to the outcome we're striving for.
Yes, I believe that aligning everybody around your goals And everybody must understand where the company is going. It cannot be the CEO or the leadership. Every single person needs to understand. It's like, in battle, they have something called the commander's intent, right? When they brief the soldiers, they don't just say, you have to do this or that. They have to understand what's the final goal is, because they say that when you get to the battlefield, no plan survives. And when you get to the battlefield, things change and you have to be able to make decisions. And in a software company, every day people make small decisions on small things. And they don't run for every little thing to ask their managers. So they need to understand what the expectation is. They need to understand where the company is going so they can make the best decision on their own. And this both gives them knowledge, but also it makes them feel empowered, and they're more motivated.
Yes, more engaged. If you give the empowerment to your people, they're going to be more engaged because they know that they have the influence, they have the capability to bring their minds, their experience, their knowledge to the table that's going to make an impact to your business. And especially in startups, when you have 20, 30 people, maybe you have a team of 5 engineers and even a team of 20, right? You still, there's so much, everybody has so much impact, and be able to have that empowerment and know my boss, my company, they trust me. They know I have the best interest. That goes a long way. And then even through the pandemic, people have really learned that they want to work for a company that has meaning, right? That what they do has meaning to the company. The company has values and goals that are aligned with my personal meaning of what I want to be and what I want to accomplish as a human being on this time that we have on the planet. And I think that's where a lot of companies struggle, is connecting the dots. So if you have a very clear vision, everybody knows where you're going, everyone's aligned, then it makes it easier for your line managers. Even if you're small, you have one layer of managers that aren't your executive. It makes that layer of managers, their job so much easier to help their direct reports, those like the individual contributors, to understand, I might be doing something over here that might feel minimal, but actually has a big impact, a ripple effect of making our goals as a company. And now I understand, even though I feel maybe like I'm just an entry-level person, but actually what I'm doing helps then the senior level, which helps the management, which helps the salespeople, which helps us grow, and growing is going to get us to the goal, right? It's helping everybody have that line of vision, not just the executives.
Yes, I think it's both having the line of vision and understanding what the company does. And I think the other thing that really makes people motivated and engaged is the feeling that they have that their voice is heard. I was brought into a company that had a lot of problems, and I interviewed many of the employees to understand what the root cause is. And I remember speaking to one employee, and we spent an hour. In that hour, they talked, they enumerated so many problems. You have no idea. And they looked at me and they said, but I hope you're not going to tell this to my manager. I really want to stay here. I really love this company. And it was like, okay, but you just told me how bad things are. Why do you love this company? And they said, because I worked in other companies, but this is the first company that when I say something, people listen to me and my voice is heard, and I know that I can really make a difference. And that was not the manager. That was, one of the most junior engineers in the team.
Yeah.
They felt valued, and that changed their whole perspective and their whole engagement level. I think it's so important.
Yeah, it is. I implemented with one company, there are about 130 employees, on their all hands, an executive shout out. And we do our best to do an individual. A couple times we've done team because there's been a huge team effort, but we really try to call out an individual. And I was like, I wonder if this is really going to have any impact. And so I've kind of, asked around like what people think about it. And I've gotten really great feedback that it's really cool to be honored and recognized by the executive team in front of the whole company. And we tie it to our values. We recognize someone because they went above and beyond within a value, and this is the value, and this is why we recognize them. So it ties into your culture. it honors your values. It reminds people that these are our values and that we do recognize people for living them. And I think it just goes a long way. Like a lot of times founders and CEOs and other leaders, they get stuck in this, well, the only way to make this person happy is to throw more money at them, but I can't because I don't have any. No. There are so many other ways to recognize people and have them be engaged. And the more you work on the non-monetary things, the more engaged you'll probably see your employees at, because everybody can go somewhere else and probably make more money. Even in a bad industry and economy, there's probably an opportunity somewhere out there that they could do that. So why do they stay? They stay for their manager. They stay for their vision, the goal, the meaning. They stay because they are empowered and they feel heard. And these are really important things and they're recognized.
There is research. I actually talk about it in my book. There is actual research that shows that beyond a certain point, monetary rewards are not what's keeping people engaged and what motivates them to do more. They actually can detract from the engagement. I don't understand the detract thing, but I understand that there are other things that make a big difference. I spoke I interviewed a nonprofit leader. She created a theater group from scratch. And not only she's not paying the actors, they're actually at the beginning they had to pay her to participate in that. And I said, how do you make it happen? And you say you have to give the people, you have to love people, and you have to give them what they want. And this goes beyond monetary rewards. And I believe that's the truth. I believe that people really care, just like you said, they care about purpose, they care about recognition, they want to know that they have an influence, their voice is heard. And this is something that doesn't cost a lot, but means so much to employees and can make all the difference in the engagement level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we wrap up our time together, is there any last final thought or tool or trick or perspective you'd like to share with the audience today?
I think the most important thing that a CEO needs to do is to provide a nurturing environment for their team, an environment where they can innovate, where they can have a purpose, the right values, and at the same time, they must provide an environment. There has to be some guidelines, so the right processes, mentorship, people that work with the employees and help them. Some of the things that I saw, I would say there are 4 things that are important in a scale-up environment. One is to get the right people that understands the technology and are working well with the rest of the team and like the values. So people that fit the value, understand the technology, and work well in the environment. Provide a lightweight process to streamline the work. And if you're growing, have a plan on how to scale your team such that it won't weigh down the team. Because I've seen cases of startups that suddenly, had a growth spurt, and they just didn't know how to get in new people into the fold. So this is, and as an HR person, I'm sure that you can speak about it. Yes. But this is one of the things that I saw and I experienced with the companies that I work with, how it's important it is to provide the tools to get new people into the fold with the values, know the software, and have people that mentor them until they become one with the team.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen so many times where a company wants to grow and they hire all these people and they don't do it in a very methodical way of what is this person going to do when they come on? How do we onboard them? Not only from a culture company perspective, but from a team product project perspective. And then ensuring that they are, like you said, getting into the fold before you go and add another person or tens of people, right? And there's so many times where you can actually burn out your foundation employer, founder employees, right? The employees that actually your first 5 to 10 engineers, developers, and now you want to grow to 20, 30, 50 engineers and developers. Well, you're going to lean on your initial founding developers to do the interviewing, to do the training, to help the people get onboarded and ingrained. And if you're not hiring in a very methodical way where people know, I'm hiring so that this person can do X. I'm hiring so that we can start to build something else. I'm hiring so that we can fix the bugs that we have and give us more room to then do more innovative things, whatever it might be. Then you're going to turn and burn. And all of a sudden now you got high turnover with your new hires. And now you're really burning out your founders because now you're asking them to do that cycle all over again with new people. That is constantly happening. And then 2 years later, you're wondering where all your founder engineers went. Well, you burnt them out because you didn't think through your hiring process. And you're shaking your head, so I'm sure you've seen that too.
Exactly. I've seen that, yes.
So hopefully, as we wrap up, the listeners, maybe that's the biggest takeaway. If as you get to your scaling, make sure you have a solid plan. Why are you bringing these people on? What are they going to do for you? And then in HR and in that department, how are you going to incorporate them into the business so they can ramp up as quickly as possible and actually become part of your business and be producing for you?
And be effective as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Talila, it was so great to have you on the call today. I know there's so much more that we could talk about. I look forward to seeing your book coming out and reading all the great, amazing steps and information you have there. And for those on the call or listening to this, I hope you have a wonderful day and you've got something in your pocket that you've taken away from it. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time.